Bienvenue, benvenuti, and welcome to Expatriotical, the podcast for expats, travelers, and other adventurous souls. I'm Chandra Ali, and after living as an expat with my husband and 4 children in 2 different countries for almost 6 years, I've learned the arts of pivoting during pitfalls, traveling tastefully for less, and soaking in amazing new cultures without losing your own. Join me as we dive into the joys and challenges of travel and the expat life in every episode. Hi, everybody. Today is an interview episode, and I am very excited to introduce you to my guest today. She is witty and wise and shares my affinity for British culture. She is also a fellow Expatriotical listener, and her reaching out to me after she listened to episode 6, Lending a Helping Hand, was the impetus for this episode. So, without further ado, let's jump in. Good morning. This is my guest, everybody, today. I'm so excited. If you listened to last week's episode, this is the Michelle from Woolneedlethread. So make sure you go back and listen to the Shan Select from last week's episode. But I have my dear friend, Michelle Packer here. She's up bright and early, her time, to do this interview with me. And so, Michelle, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? For example, where are you from originally? What was life like growing up? Did you have siblings? Were you more of like an introvert or an extrovert? Tell us about yourself, Michelle.
Well, good morning, first
Good
of all.
morning.
So I grew up in the northeast of the United States, in Connecticut and Maine for the most part. I am the youngest of 5, but my siblings are quite a bit older than I am, between 9 and 18 years older than I am. So I actually have very few memories of being a young child with my siblings at home. By the time we moved to Maine, when I was about 10 years old, they were all out of the house except for my brother, who
Okay.
was back and forth to college. And we never traveled. So growing up, travel seemed magical and something that I always wanted to do and couldn't wait to get the opportunity to do. So the first thing I did was select colleges to apply to that were as far away as I could get, and ended up going to New Orleans, and from there to Texas and California, and met my husband in Texas, and we started traveling together. One of the first things we did after we met was take a trip to Italy together. So
That's
I guess,
romantic.
yes, I guess that set me on the path that I wanted, right? That was, I guess, the big clue that here was someone I could travel with.
That's fantastic. And yes, very romantic. And so now you've obviously mentioned husband. What does your family construct look like now?
Now we have 2 children who are 12 and almost 11, and 2 dogs. But we were married for quite a while before we had the children. So we have a long history, just the 2 of us, and a long history as a family as well.
Okay. And so, as some people have listened to, if they started the adventure of listening to Expatriotical from the beginning, you and I both met when we were living just south of the city of Milan, Italy. And will you remind me, when exactly did you move to Milan?
We moved in late November of 2019, the week before Thanksgiving, um, full of hope and optimism about all the things we were going to see. And then, of course, as you know, by early February of 2020, all of that had changed.
Yeah.
So it was uh, an expatriate assignment that we spent mostly in our house.
Ooh, we could dive into a whole
Yeah,
subject right there.
that's a
But
different episode.
yeah, that's what I think. That could be a different episode. Definitely. I think I could have several guests for that. It could just be an entire group thing, because that was a lot of us that were living in different country. I mean, obviously people in their home country as well, but like it was different when you were away from family and all that sort of thing. But we won't touch that right now.
Right.
But
Just as an example, you and I were living at American expatriates in the same town, and I think it was almost a year before we met.
yeah,
I
yeah,
was there for a year.
I had heard of you, I think around the time that you moved there, but I don't think I met you until things were finally like I think September maybe of
Yes.
2020 when I met you.
Yeah, I think that sounds right.
Yeah. So, but Milan was not your first rodeo of with being an expatriate. What or where, more accurately, was your first experience as an expat, and why did you move there?
The first time we went overseas, we were living in California. I had started graduate school at UC Santa Barbara, and my husband was still working where we were living, which was in the Bay Area, so about 5 hours by car. He took an expat assignment with his job, which was a 1 year assignment in Perth, Australia, on the west coast of Australia.
Okay.
Um, I was teaching at that time, so for the first 6 months he was away, he was there by himself, and then I joined him for the second 6 months. And as that was a temporary assignment, we lived in a corporate apartment, which means we didn't bring any personal effects with us. Um, we didn't hang anything on the walls. We didn't acquire a lot of stuff while we were there because there was no allowance to bring anything back.
Okay.
So it was a very itinerant kind of lifestyle,
Okay.
but still a lot of fun.
So, how would you say things were for you that first time? Just mentally, emotionally, just some challenges maybe that you faced that first assignment because it does sound a little bit different than what I know your one of your other assignments. I can't say second assignment, but one of your other assignments like Milan to be and just in general for people. How was that first assignment for you?
Yeah, my husband was working with a lot of primarily Australians, which meant that we were not automatically embedded within a large expat community, which is quite different when you have to kind of land in the middle of a new culture and find your own way. Um, and it being just the two of us, there wasn't the sort of easy inroad that you have when you're with other families where parents share advice about, who is the best dentist and where do I find kid shoes and that sort of thing. So most days I was really on my own to figure out what to do with myself, to find any connection. And it really struck me when I was listening to your episode about building community, which I completely agree with. But I was thinking back on my experience and thinking that there wasn't a community for me to find um, for the most part.
Yeah.
So I had to um, kind of piece one together for myself. And for me, that started with going to the local coffee shop in the morning and working up the courage to speak to someone there,
Yes.
which is hard for me. Um, and you imagine that an English speaking country won't pose communication challenges. But the first one that I had to overcome was understanding the accent,
Okay.
which I didn't think was going to be a problem, but you never do until it's there.
Yes.
So I ordered my coffee, and the barista said, "Ishka." And I said, "I'm sorry."
That's what I'm
And she,
thinking. I'm sorry.
"Ishka." And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying." And she said, "Ini sugar." It's like, oh, excuse me, no,
Yeah.
thank you.
No.
Um, but she had a good laugh at me not being able to understand her, and so that was the opening, right? And then after that, each day when I saw her, we chatted a little bit more. And it's not like we ever got to be friends, but at least there was a connection. I was making a connection to another human being. Um, so that was my first Australian connection. But beyond that, I had to find my own way. And for me, being outside and being in nature is very important. So I started every day by walking up to the enormous local park in Perth. It's called Kings Park, which
Will
is
you say that?
absolutely beautiful.
Will you say that
Kings Park,
again? Kings. Okay.
Kings Park, just acres and acres of beautiful gardens and nature trails. And that was a way to kind of center and start my day and then think about what I was going to do next, and tackle whatever challenges um, would come up in the day.
And would you say that in that 6 months that you spent in Perth, that you felt with these strategies, if you will, that you developed, did you feel by the end of the time that you had become more comfortable? And those, even if it wasn't a friendship, that you had made those connections had made you feel more well adjusted?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I think you have to, or what I feel is that I need to understand that you can have a genuine connection with someone without them being your best friend.
Yes.
Um, you can, um, see people that you look forward to seeing, even if maybe you don't know their last name, or maybe it's the only person that you see is maybe the person that you cross paths with in the park every morning, and you smile at each other, and sometimes you say hello, and sometimes they're distracted and they don't want to say hello, but it's a connection, and it's worth something, you know?
I that's beautiful. I really agree that those I can think of. I don't know if you. I make an effort to try to learn people's names in the grocery store, and I haven't had the or thought through the verbiage that you just put there of like making that connection. But I definitely remember in Italy, one of the checkers at the end, or at the one of the cashiers, I should say. Her name was Sabrina, at VG. And sorry for everybody listening. That's Via Viaggiatore Goloso. So it's just so much easier to say VG. It was a market that was close to us, and so I would see her, and we've actually, like, when she found out that I was moving, even though we never did anything outside of like chatting and her being super patient when I would bring 4 kids with me, through checking out. And then when I was leaving, we connected on Facebook, and then we've actually been able to like chat here and there. I've helped her with stuff with her. She has a child that went to America for a bit, and then I went back a couple months ago, about a couple months ago, and I saw her and was like, ciao, Sabrina, come stai? And it was really, there is that connection that helps to make things feel more like home because
Hmm.
you have those familiar faces. And I think that's such a beautiful point. And I hope that people listening won't discount those, because those are actually those connections are very important. Um,
Yeah,
and so,
absolutely.
so after Perth, where did you go?
And we were back in the United States for a few years.
Okay.
My husband was working on a project, and as a part of that project, we then went to the UK. So we lived in London for 4 years
Yep.
at that
Okay.
point. And that was then a little bit different from our Perth assignment. First, because in the intervening years, we'd built up more relationships with people at the company, and some of the people that were in Australia were then in the UK. And also, he was at that point working for a very large company. So there were other expats on other assignments who were also in London. So we got kind of dropped in to the expat community with his company. Um, but this was another kind of weird experience for me because just because your spouses have the same employer doesn't mean that you're going to have a lot in common, and that community didn't feel comfortable to me.
Okay.
Um, just very nice people, just not where I felt at ease. So again, I was sort of building my own community there. And we lived in slightly west of the London city centre in a borough called Hammersmith. And in much of London, there are little neighborhoods built around tiny little parks.
Okay.
And at this point, we had our dog with us. And every day at 3 o'clock, everyone from the neighborhood walked their dogs at the same time in the park. And so that became my community. I got to know everybody there. I knew all the dogs, I knew all the people, and we would all make a couple of circles of the park and we'd chat about our day and our lives and what was going on. And they always had loads of questions about strange Americans and their strange habits. And but again, if I needed anything, any advice about anything, they were there,
Yeah.
and I could just casually ask that question. And I knew if I needed anything, all I had to do was go to the park at 3 o'clock, and I would find someone to answer it.
And would you say, just to delve in there, dive in there deeper, would you say that that, or could you share, did any of those connections go further, or was that again just kind of like that, and you ended up making friends elsewhere, or how would you, I guess, how would you share that experience?
I do still keep in touch with some people from the lane, we call it. We lived on uh, Black Lion Lane, and so that was our community. And when we've gone back to London, I've gone back to see them
Okay.
as well and spend some time with them. And also in London, most people don't have cars, and you walk everywhere you need to go. And so there, again, those casual connections, there are just dozens and dozens of people that you'll see on a daily basis, just walking to the post office, walking to the supermarket, walking back. Um, uh, Probably literally 20 or so people a day that I knew by face and enough to say hello to. And occasionally, this is, you have to build up to it in the UK, but you can say, "How are you?" Sometimes considered a bit intrusive to ask that question, so you have to wait until you've established a connection to ask that. But
Okay.
you can always ask about their dog.
See, that's a wonderful little tidbit to share, because to, Americans, like, that's a very, general
Mm.
question. It's not personal. It's not an intimate thing. So it's really, I don't know. I think it's just something that makes you think outside of the box, because both of these countries that you've talked about are English speaking countries. And a lot of times, when you move abroad, you're dealing with a completely foreign language, but this is not foreign. It's still the same mother tongue, just with so many colloquial and cultural differences. And that's one of those cultural differences where you're like, oh, okay, I guess I shouldn't have asked that, or that sort of thing. But I think that the strategy that you share, both of them actually, but this one especially, works well for multiple different personality types. As you know, and as most people that have listened know, I'm pretty extroverted. Like, I don't have a problem trying to get to know people and that sort of thing. I'm not really shy, but I think that the strategy that you have works really well for any personality type. Just a smile when you pass by for the first dozen or more times before you would say, like, hello, good day, that kind of thing. I don't know, would you agree, or would you say, no, Chandra, you're not understanding correctly?
No, I think you're right. I think you have to be patient with yourself. I think any expat situation you go into, even if you do, let's say you do multiple expat assignments within the same company, for
Mm-hmm.
example, so you have the same corporate culture, you're not necessarily going to have the same local culture. Or if you could go multiple times to Italy with different companies, and so you're never within the same corporate culture. And you have to have patience with yourself to um, navigate that at your own speed.
Yes, yes,
So I think
definitely.
when a lot of people go in to an expat assignment, they're thinking about all the places they're going to see and how exciting that's going to be. But especially if you don't have a lot of help, say from a relocation company, which we haven't always had, um, you might be trying to navigate the local bureaucracy, and that can really sap your energy. And so
Yes.
maybe you don't feel like exploring your new neighborhood for a week or a month or 2 months, and that's fine. I think you have to, what I have found for myself is to find a place where I feel comfortable, even if it's just going to the local coffee shop in the morning and saying hello to the person working there. And then let that be the thing that gives you a little bit of strength or a little bit of confidence to maybe, when you're ready, go a little bit further. Um, Walk around the neighborhood and see what there is.
Yeah.
Maybe you won't find anything. Okay, so the next time you feel comfortable and strong and ready, walk in the other direction. Um, and maybe you'll find something on the other end, and then you have a new little nexus that you can start building from. And I think you just, the really important thing is to take it at your own pace.
I think that's a lot of really good wisdom there to give yourself grace, take it at your own pace. That's going to be our quote. Okay. This is from Michelle. Take it at your own pace. And I'm adding, give yourself grace. So I think that's really great. And as we continue in your expat story, you later on, you had children. And so when you moved with your children, did that change your strategy? Were things easier for you or actually harder? How do you feel
Well,
about that?
we left London when I was 5 months pregnant with my son,
Okay.
and we went from London back to Perth.
Okay.
Um, so now this time in Perth, we were going to a residential assignment. So that meant we could bring personal effects with us. We could find a house. Um, so to begin with, that was completely different in terms of feeling settled as opposed to feeling like you were in a very temporary situation. Um, so it was that pregnancy was physically difficult. I was healthy, but it was very uncomfortable because
Mm-hmm.
my son ended up being a knee down breech, and
Ooh.
yeah, he was knee down for most of the last trimester, so it was physically quite uncomfortable. We lived on the river in close to the river in Perth, and I would go for long walks every day by the river. And when we were first there, as I said, 5 months pregnant, um, the first thing I noticed moving from London is that there was no one to say hello to because there just aren't as many people out on the street in
Okay.
Perth as there are in London because people have cars. And that changes everything in terms of a neighborhood dynamic. So by the time he was born, I was physically worn down from the discomfort of the pregnancy and emotionally quite um, lonely, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest, as well, because there just weren't people that I was seeing. Um, and this is when the community kicked in for me. Two things happened. The There were women, other expats who I didn't know at the time very well, but when my son was born, they organized to bring us cooked meals once a week, so that I wouldn't have that chore on top of everything else. And they would stay and visit for a little while. So that was lovely. Um, to have a home cooked meal once a week
Yes.
and always with enough for leftovers. They were very generous and multiple courses and all of that stuff. So they became a little bit community. And then a lovely thing that they do in Australia is that first time mothers are organized, if you will, by the government. You're put into a group with other first time moms who have babies about the same age.
Okay.
And for 6 weeks, you go to classes together once a week about, mothering skills and parenting and health and et cetera, et cetera. And then at the end of that, you have the option to continue, which we did. And they have these wonderful facilities in Western Australia where moms can get together and there's a space that's owned by the government and it has toys and it has play facilities for kids, and you form a group and you sign up for a time period and you can go and use that space. And the only thing they ask is that um, you pick 1 week a year or 2 weeks a year, whatever, how many they need, where it's your turn to clean.
Okay.
So you clean all the toys and you wipe down the kitchen, but you can go and once a week for 2 hours we had playgroup there, and so we all watched our children grow together for the first couple of years of their lives, and they all played and became friends. And I still keep in touch with that group as well. And now it's been 12 years.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah.
That's very sweet. I really like that. So I feel like from you sharing your experience, we pretty much have different ways that people can walk away with today after listening to this episode of how to try to acclimate, to make connections, to adjust slowly but surely in different situations, whether that, like you said, just going to a local coffee shop, walking your dog, or just just taking a walk in general. And then obviously with children, there can kind of be more of a built-in way to get to know people, depending again on your personality and your comfortability levels. Something that you said though in the first part when you were talking about Perth and not being able to bring anything with you, any personal effects, and then how the second time going to Perth and then I'm also going to London, you were able to bring just some personal effects. For me, I feel like that is so key, to really, for me, feeling at home. Like that's just, would you say that if a person has the ability, to bring something, like whether it's just a little bit of wall art, that could be something that helps one to adjust a little bit, just to know that like this is home now, and that sort of thing? Or would you say that for you that wasn't super consequential?
I think it helps. Of course, the hard thing is if you're going overseas for the first time or away from home, what you consider home for the first time, is knowing what that thing is going to be
Yeah.
that's going to make you feel at home. Um, I know a lot of people who have done things like, oh, I love my hair dryer. I have to have my hair dryer. Well, let me tell you, your hair dryer is not the thing that's going to make you feel at home. You know, um, you can get a hair dryer wherever you're going. Um, for me, I love. I'm old school. I have actual physical photos, um, and I love to have my photos.
Yeah.
Um, I used one of our precious boxes of allowed shipment to bring photos with me. Um, for other people, I mean, there are other things that I love. I can imagine having like some, the favorite pillows from your living room that when you
Mm-hmm.
put them in your new living room, it's going to make your living room feel like home. Or, and then of course, when you have children, the whole thing changes
Yeah.
because, there's all kinds of junk that is uh, absolutely precious and can't be lived without. Um, yeah, but for me, I think it's the more important thing for me is to invest the time in finding those little local places where I feel okay
Yeah.
and safe. And I don't mean, I don't mean safe in a typical word, but in a typical sense, but in the sense of, okay, I know what's happening here. I
Mm-hmm.
can I know that I can communicate with people here and they're going to understand what I'm saying and I'm going to understand them. And I know what's expected of me socially in this space. And I feel good when I'm here. And it takes a little bit of time to find those places.
Yeah.
And I think it's worth investing that time because it's a nice complement to finding that community. Because of course, as you know from our experience in Italy, people come and go at different times. So the community that you build, their assignment might come to an end before yours does, and so
Yes.
they're gone and you're still there. Um, and you have to, I believe, have something that's just for you and doesn't depend on someone else's circumstances.
That's a lot of, that's a really good piece of wisdom, having that place, that whatever that's just for you, that won't change when other people leave. That's really brilliant. So of all the different locations, which have we named them all? We have Perth twice, London, have we named, and Italy, have we named all of the locations?
That's all for me. Yes.
Okay. So with that, which has been your favorite, or if you're welcome to say like actually back home in America is my favorite. You're welcome to say whatever, but of the expat locations, which one has been your favorite?
For me, I'd have to say London.
London.
Um,
Okay.
I still feel when we go back to London, I still feel when we get there as if I've arrived home.
Oh,
I,
that's beautiful.
that, yeah, that's the place where I feel most
At
at
home.
home. Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Even growing up, I never felt entirely at home where I was. And once we got to London, I immediately had the sense of, yes, this is where I've wanted to be.
And that's exciting. I think that's, again, another thing to put out there for people that are going to start for the first time their adventure as an expat, that you could end up finding a new place that really feels like home to you, and that's
Yes.
an exciting thing to look for. It doesn't mean that that will happen, but it could. And what a great thing to be surprised with, really. And so also, what is your favorite memory when living as an expat?
Oh gosh. I mentioned the 3 p.m. walk in the local park in
Mm-hmm.
London, and I think just my joy of discovering that is probably my favorite experience um, as an expat. People told us before we left that we said we were bringing our dog with us, and they said, "Oh, that's good for you because the English love their dogs and their horses, so that will
Okay.
be the way that you connect." And I kind of laughed about it, but it ended up being true. Um, and just the walking into the park for the first time and the people there just immediately being full of interest about my dog and asking questions about my dog and how is every day, how is your dog? Um, I think the average English person will ask first, how's your dog, before they ever ask, how are you?
How are you? Whew.
Yeah.
I would be I guess we'd be out of luck. We don't have we don't have a dog.
Well, you
Have to
can get
borrow one.
one.
Yeah, have to
Yeah.
borrow one.
Yeah.
And so would you I I feel like this is still a slightly different question, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. What did you like or enjoy most about being an expat?
Oh, I guess I always have gone into it with the idea that everything is going to be different.
Okay.
I think a lot of people go into expat assignments looking for things that are the same, and I kind of enjoy the fact that absolutely everything is different.
Okay.
Um, yeah, like even if you speak the same language, people relate to each other differently. They relate to their world differently, and seeing that and discovering it and discovering all the ways that people view the world differently is tremendously exciting to me, and I love that.
I do really like, yeah, I really also enjoy seeing, like, oh, they really look at that differently than I do, just
Yeah.
makes you step outside of your own world, outside of your own box, and not reevaluate in a negative way, but just kind of actually grows your world a little bit, I think
Yes.
personally.
Yeah, very much so.
And so, okay, I have two more questions. One I'm throwing in here, which you are not prepped for, and I don't. If you cannot share, you can just say I cannot share. But are there any more expat adventures on your horizon?
Oh, not that we know of,
Okay,
not that we're planning for, because uh, being in Italy during COVID was a bit of a sting for our
yeah,
family. It was hard on the kids, and I think we are going to be reluctant to jump in again for a
for a
little
while.
while. Yeah.
So I'm just going to daydream out loud for you just because I do know you. Maybe once the kids are like graduated from high school and off in university, maybe a retirement gig in London or the UK somewhere. I'm just going to put that out there for you. Would that be something that you're like, yeah, I'd be open to that?
Yes, put it out there and I will take it. Yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, my final question for you are there any last words of wisdom or like a positive reflection or just some inspiration that you'd like to share with us before we go today?
Well, sure. If you don't mind, I have a short poem that I love
Oh,
that I would love to share with you.
Yes, I love
Um,
that.
I've been reading a lot of poetry lately, and uh, a lot by Mary Oliver. I don't know if you know that name, but she's a line of hers that you might know is, "What will you do with this one wild and precious life?" That's a
Yes.
line from one of her poems. But as a worrier and an introvert, there's a poem of hers that I love, which is called "I Worried." So if I'll read that to you, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth run as it was taught? And if not, how shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I am, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight fading, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing, and gave it up, and took my old body and went out into the morning and sang.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I love that. I love because there are there are so many worries that we have. Like when you're preparing or when you're already there and you're
Yes.
in the midst of it and you're in the thick of it and you're like, what about this and what about my kids and what about I mean, if you have kids and what about, all these what ifs and yeah, just step out into the morning and sing. I like that. That's
There'll be
beautiful.
time for worrying. Just make time for singing too.
That's perfect. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I also have to give you credit. Everyone needs to know that Michelle had reached out to me and said, I love this, episode that you did, but what about the ways that you can on your own start to be more comfortable where you are. And so this whole episode was really, I mean, this was all Michelle, honestly. So thank you, Michelle. I really appreciate it. I think this will be a blessing and something that's really significant for a lot of people out there. And I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope it does help someone.
All right. You guys, there was so much good stuff in that interview. Michelle really is a seasoned expat, and I loved that she shared how her experiences abroad, even in English speaking countries, which is her mother tongue, by the way, had their challenges. So please hear that and let it soak in and give yourself grace if you are currently in another country, which may even speak your language, but the culture there is like learning a new language in and of itself. I just wanted to say thank you again to my friend Michelle for joining me today and allowing us all to glean some wisdom on how to take it at your own pace when getting acclimated to your new country. As a reminder, and I will include a link or two in the show notes, Michelle's company, Woolneedlethread, was our Shan Select 2 weeks ago. A small correction from what I said in the interview. And you can find all of her gorgeous bags, purses, and totes at woolneedlethread.com. Now for today's Shan Select. When I was talking to Michelle, we talked about things from your home country that make you feel more comfy or help you to adapt sooner. In my opinion, there is nothing that can do that as quickly as food. When you've moved to a new country and after weeks or months of tasting the regional fare, getting a break and getting a taste of home can make everything seem or feel all right, even if just for the moment. And currently, not that things are not all right for me, but just simply to get a taste of home. This Friday, Chris and I went with some friends visiting from India, but who are originally from the US, to a Texas barbecue joint in Paris called Melt. Melt has 4 different restaurant locations plus 2 delis. And let me just tell you that their barbecue is legit. The dry rubbed brisket, pulled pork, and braised spare ribs were absolutely mouthwatering. The sides were hearty and delicious, and the IPA that I had was just the perfect beverage to accompany the meal. Now, I know that not everyone visiting Paris, especially for the first time, may have Texas barbecue on their minds, but it is my understanding that over 10,000 Americans currently live in Paris as expats. And so for those of us that enjoy good barbecue, and for everyone else, regardless of the country that they come from that enjoys barbecue, this is a must taste if you're visiting Paris or if you live here. I will include the Melt website and the link to their Instagram feed in the show notes. That's a wrap for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michelle from Woolneedlethread as much as I did. On your way out of your streaming app, if you haven't done so yet, please hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to share Expatriotical with a friend who might benefit from listening. Thank you all so much for joining me here today. I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I'll meet you back here again next week. But until then, this is Chandra Alley reminding you to live and travel in the know with Expatriotical.